You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week, we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week, we're joined by Jill Escher, president of the National Council on Severe Autism, a dedicated advocate, autism research philanthropist, and mom to two children with nonverbal autism. Jill has spent her life working to support individuals and families affected by severe autism. She's funded important research, provided housing for adults with developmental disabilities, and raised awareness about the challenges faced by the autism community. Today, we'll be discussing severe autism, the rising prevalence of autism, and the need for long-term care and housing. Welcome to the podcast, Jill Escher.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, so severe autism is something that I think probably needs a little bit of explanation and a little bit of maybe even history to why this is something that we have delineated now. Whereas in the past, maybe it wasn't something spoken about by itself. But do you mind just giving us a little bit of background about what severe autism is and why it has its own definition?
Sure. Well, when we came into being in about 2018, we were sort of responding to an advocacy environment that was increasingly focused on the very high functioning. So increasingly focused on neurodiversity, on self-advocates, on those who were able to live independently and people who could kind of self-determine their own lives. And, the people who have that good fortune are wonderful, but they didn't represent our family's realities. And so a bunch of families got together and said, hey, all these kids who can't really self-advocate and will need lifetime 24/7 care and have sometimes really grievous symptoms, them all, the aggression, the self-injury, the property destruction, the pica, the eloping, everything. We were being kind of marginalized and sidelined. We said, we need our own voice. So we came up with National Council on Severe Autism, not because severe autism at that time had a clinical definition or a specific scientific definition. It didn't, but it was a kind of idiomatic phrase that people kind of understood what you meant, when I said, when I'd say, oh, my kids have autism, they're like, oh, what's their superpower? I'm like, no, they have severe autism, they're nonverbal, they can't achieve any of the, basic daily living skills that you might expect even of a 3-year-old, right? Yeah. And now they're adults. We use the word severe autism because there wasn't really a great term for us to kind of use from the, from clinical practice or from research practice. So, it's people kind of know what it means. And I have to say, the definitions, the nomenclature, these things are kind of constantly evolving in autism. Right now there is a movement to use the term profound autism to carve out a certain subset of the autism population. And profound autism refers to people with IQs of under 50 who require 24/7 care or supervision, and who have often high levels of dependence because of their limited functional capacities. So and minimally verbal or nonverbal, like my kids. So profound autism is also a really good and useful term. Severe autism we think of as a little bit broader than that. IQ under 50, that's pretty strict. We work with a lot of families whose kids have IQs over 50, but still are very, very, very severely impacted and disabled by autism. So long answer to your short question.
No, but I mean, it does help us to understand that it's almost like a societal definition. It's helping to be able to understand that this is a unique subset of autistic individuals that we need to be able to represent equally in all the decision making, all the resources, and even the funding that's out there. Can you, you said that you have two children that both have what you would define as severe autism.
Mhm.
What did that feel like? What was your experience going through their childhood all the way through adulthood that will help people to really understand, this is what we're facing as a family. These are the barriers, these are the challenges. What are the biggest kind of steps or transitional steps that you hit?
Well, how many weeks do you have to talk about this? So my two kids with autism are now 26, that's Jonathan, and then 19, and that's Sophie. And so I've been in this autism thing a very, very long time. Jonathan was diagnosed in 2001 when he was 2 years old, and Sophie was diagnosed when she was short of 2 years old. And both times those diagnoses came as a complete shock. Autism seemed to come out of nowhere. There was no autism up our family trees. My pregnancies were very normal. My husband and I, we don't have autism. There was they have no genetic defects. They're physically very normal. And so it was completely out of left field. We were blindsided by this whole autism thing. And for it to happen twice was even more shocking.
Mhm.
Um, and I can't say it was beautiful or easy or fun. I mean, especially with my son, who's very, very, very profoundly impacted. So Jonathan was like the poster child for autism. He didn't play with toys. He didn't respond to his name. He was very irritable. He didn't point. He didn't share and show. He didn't play like peekaboo or little games like that. When you read him a story, he had no interest in any story or book, but he wanted to rip the pages. When you gave him like a toy car, he wouldn't be like vroom vroom. He would be like, oh, I want to spin the wheels. So he would
Mhm.
walk into a room like with a ceiling fan, and he would just sort of like obsess on the ceiling fan, rather than kind of looking around him. He would never engage with another child. He would hardly even engage with us. He never developed babbling. He never developed language. Classic. Like if you had the checklist, like he had every single thing,
Yep.
that you could imagine. So by the time he got the diagnosis, we walk into the neurologist's office after getting a referral from the pediatrician. And the pediatrician was like, what is going on here? Right? Because at that time, he had really hardly even seen autism. He had been in practice for decades. He was an older gentleman. He'd barely even seen autism. Referred us to the neurologist. The neurologist basically took one look at Jonathan in the waiting room and said, oh, he has it in spades. Meaning, oh, he has autism in spades. And we're like, oh, okay. But for us, like at that time, we didn't know what this was. Like this was not in our vocabulary. We had no experience with it. And he was correct. I mean, Jonathan has autism in spades, and he still does. He's 26 years old now, and he is absolutely profoundly impacted beyond belief. He is dependent 24/7 on us for everything. He has no language at all. He has no functional skills at all. He is tall, dark, and handsome, looks highly, intelligent. He doesn't have kind of the dysmorphic features. He's very strong. He's physically very robust. But, his brain obviously was very, very badly miswired during development. And that's really what autism is. Autism is miswiring of the brain during development. Sophie, on the other hand, who's 17, she has profound autism, and she's nonverbal, and she, has, no real functional skills above, like a preschool level, but she is delightful, right? She's like, Johnny's grumpy all the time and difficult all the time. I have a hard time taking him anywhere. Sophie, on the other hand, is kind of cheerful, you know, happy, kind of loves to do things, loves people, very social, not destructive, not aggressive, not self-injurious, and doesn't elope. The one thing she does do that's really kind of still very, very distressing is she has pica, and pica, as I think a lot of your listeners know, is the ingestion of inedible objects. And she is sort of compulsively putting things in her mouth and often swallowing them. She's ended up in the hospital a couple of times. She had to have surgery, full surgery once, to have removal of like a toy ball that she had eaten. She had another endoscopic procedure to remove an inedible object she had eaten. And Yeah, so that's kind of, but that's a mini nightmare compared to, what's going on with Johnny. So it's
Yeah.
been a long, long, long journey. And the journey really is still just beginning, because the biggest and hardest part of the journey is going to be the adulthood as the parents like me age and pass away. And so this is as difficult as it has been. And believe me, it's been pretty horrific at times. It's nothing compared to what's coming up.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of families share that same experience, is that everything's individual in who your child is. And, you're going to have, everybody's unique in the challenges, the barriers, the areas that are going to create more difficulty. But the commonality is, oftentimes with severe autism, is that you're needing higher levels of support. You're needing more resources available to you. And you need to have a plan through adulthood, oftentimes, in order to be able to protect kind of your child's safety and your adult safety. So,
Oh, it's so hard. It's so overwhelming. It's so complex. It's so expensive. This is really what keeps parents up at night, not really knowing how they can plan for the future, given, how complicated and expensive it is. And also with this sort of, shall we say, maybe bleak policy environment that we're in as well.
absolutely. And I think oftentimes we get stuck on, the immediate dollars, which are keeping us from the resources that maybe we should be putting in right now to save in the long term. And you mentioned some of the medical components, whether that was your daughter having to have the scope and to be able to kind of remove items that she ingested. You have families that have had severe injury or self-injury, where it's to the point where, they're hospitalized as well, and they are returning and readmitted. And these create a lot of costs and a lot of stress on the
Our
family.
kids are so expensive.
Mhm.
Our kids are astronomically expensive. I mean, compared to like a typically developing kid. There's no doubt about it. And for many, many, many reasons. I mean, it's, as you said, it's the medical care, but it's also like the service providers, it's the
Mhm.
programs, it's the levels of supervision, it's property destruction, it's all of that. And it's very, very, very financially stressful on autism families, severe autism families.
And the financial stress probably creates emotional stress and social emotional stress within the
No,
family as well. Do you hear that from a lot of the families
oh,
that you speak with, as far as, the disruption that causes, not because your children aren't wonderful people, and not because you don't love them with every beating heartbeat that they have,
that's
but
right.
because there's added stressors that are put onto you that, as parents, as caregivers, just are beyond the capacity at certain points for you to take on. Do you hear that from families?
All the time. Of course, of course. I mean, autism is backbreaking. Or it can be. I mean, again, the autism, I'm talking about really a more obviously severe form of autism. It can be really, I want to say, a nightmare for families. Now, again, as you said, it doesn't mean we don't love our children. I mean, I absolutely love my children. And, my daughter is my closest friend in the whole world. We do everything together, everything. I mean, people say we're joined at the hip. I mean, I can't even imagine life without her. She is the most precious thing in the world. But not for 1 second would I wish this disability on her. Do I wish I had a magic wand to get rid of this disability? Oh my God, yes. If someone said, Jill, here's a pill, you can give it to Sophie and it could, cure her autism. Obviously, it's never going to happen. I can't believe people would even hesitate. My
Mhm.
daughter can't talk. She can't clothe herself. She can't do anything, like she has no independent living skills, right? She's completely dependent on other people. It's just it's such a nightmare for families. The costs as I said, can be astronomical, and some states offer very, very little in terms of support. I'm in California, where we are fortunate to have a more robust service system, mostly funded by Medicaid dollars, but there's also other forms of support as well. Um, But, I talk to families, especially in other states, that get almost nothing. And sometimes the parents are completely isolated. They're trapped at home with a kid who's kicking in the drywall, who's climbing over the fence, who's breaking the windows, who is, sometimes kicking and scratching their siblings, and they can barely get any help. Either
Mhm.
medical help, right, crisis care help, or direct service provider help. And sometimes there's no schools available. It depends on where they are. Sometimes there's no school programs actually available to them. And when they get older, obviously they age out and they fall off the cliff. And then the adult services program kicks in, and then you see, oh my God, there's really nothing.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that, falling off the cliff saga. So yes, it's really bad. And part of the reason NCSA exists is to bring this reality to the public, bring this reality to policymakers, bring this reality to other people in the disability sphere who may be prone to using euphemistic language, or only focusing on the success stories, only focusing on the people who can engage in competitive employment, or only focus on the people who can self-advocate, right? Which we see a lot in the disability rights sphere. It's our job to make sure our voiceless, loved ones have a voice through
Yeah.
us. Otherwise, they're
Absolutely.
invisible.
And I think that you hit on something, and it's something that every time I speak with a family who has a child, or a young adult that's still their child, is that they've hit on the definition of success, the definition of what's independence, the definition of what is going to make my child's life better. It's so different. And I mean, and maybe that is kind of the picture that you can help paint for us, is that when I'm thinking about, what all parents want for their children, they want them to be independent. They want them to have a chance to be able to engage in whatever way they can with the community around them. They want them to be safe, and to have some voice in what's happening in their life. What does that look like for either your son or your daughter? Because you're going to take those same things, but they're going to be defined differently, I'm guessing, than maybe somebody whose child is going to college or something
You
different like
think?
that.
You think?
Yeah.
Just a little different. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, for us, I think the thing I hear the most is everyone wants their kids to be happy and safe, free from abuse. They want them to reach their potential.
Mhm.
They want to eliminate the, stressful, dangerous, and damaging behaviors. They want their children they don't, at a certain point, when the kids are little, you have a lot of optimism that, oh, this ABA therapy is going to, change the course of the trajectory, and we're going to have an independent child who's fully, included in kindergarten by the time he's 5, right? Well, guess what? I mean, I think ABA is helpful. I mean, you're in the ABA world. I'm not going to say it's not helpful, but it doesn't. There's no real, evidence that it takes a kid with severe and profound autism and turns them into a kid who's, very high functioning and independent. I mean, if you have evidence for that, I'd like to see it. Again, I think it's helpful, but it's not helpful for
Mhm.
that particular narrative. So, but at a certain point, what happens in these families is, reality hits, and there's a certain amount of acceptance, and the expectations are adjusted. This happens later in childhood, usually before, adolescence. And it's a painful process for parents to go through, to go through having a lot of hope, a lot of optimism, to go into a place where, okay, this is what it is. Now let's try to give our kids the best life that we can. Every parent wants to give their kids the best life possible. And the parents have a lot of responsibility for that, because the parent, not like the kids can get on the, not like the kids can get on the phone and start making arrangements.
Yeah.
So, the best life possible is, again, reducing those really severe behaviors. And, NCSA is very, very much in favor of improving the toolbox that's available for therapeutics and interventions so that, kids can be more functional and kids can reduce those behaviors. And sometimes that's controversial, but it shouldn't be, in my view. We also need more crisis care placements and more therapeutic placements where these kinds of therapies can take place and kind of alleviate the burden on the parents who sometimes just can't, are just trying to make it through a day. We also need to really, we talked about this. We need to absolutely focus on this long-term care issue, which is going to be the crisis, one of the greatest public health crises of our time. This growing prevalence, this growing population of young people disabled by autism who can't care for themselves, who will need lifetime care. How is that going to happen? Very few autism families have the financial resources or the other family type support resources to provide that long-term care. Our kids are going to outlive us by what? 30 years, 40 years, something like that. They're going to outlive us. And, parents don't have the kind of nest eggs to make, to feed all the financial needs that will be required. So how do we do that? We aren't having this national conversation. We have to have this conversation. Our Medicaid system has important parts in it, but it's not calculated to serve this particular need, right? Medicaid is great for many, many things, and our country is generous in many, many ways, but we're not calculated to look at this autism long-term care need yet. And we need to do that. We need to do it now.
Yeah, and one thing that I've seen is that without those resources, it's hard to invest not just in care for the sake of care, but quality care. If somebody who's going to understand how to be able to meet those needs, and you need resources to be able to do that. You need set aside funds to be able to do that. And it becomes extremely important. One thing that you had mentioned, and I think it's healthy for everybody to do, it's almost that reframing. It's during that, the life cycle of your child and your family is stopping from time to time and reevaluating, where are we? What are those goals? What are the resources? What do we need to start planning for? I think all those conversations need to be done on such a regular level. I don't know if you'd be able to do this or not, but when I'm thinking from childhood all the way through adulthood, what are some of those key resources that you're saying, okay, when they're young, maybe it's this. As they start getting older, you're bringing in more of this. As they become adults, this better be there. Like, what are those things?
I was president of Autism Society, San Francisco Bay Area for quite a while. And while I was there, we changed our focus to focus on exactly this question. How can we empower parents and families to better prepare for the future? We created a whole conference with Stanford University around this question and a lot of resources around this question. It's not easy, as I said, because the financial shortfall is going to be huge. Nevertheless, there are certain planning steps that people can do. And the most obvious example is maximizing your public benefits, which again is a state to state issue. Some states are very generous with benefits and some states are not. Those are kind of, when I'm talking about benefits, I'm talking mostly about Medicaid benefits. There are other benefits available such as SSI and SSDI, federal program that's not state-based for the most part, although they're supplements from states. And maximizing that is really important. These families need every penny they could get. So get everything you can onto your spreadsheet, right? Sometimes there are HUD benefits, meaning housing, housing urban development. Sometimes there are housing subsidies, that people can avail themselves of. I'm a landlord for adults with developmental disabilities, and my disabled tenants have what's called Section 8 vouchers. And those are federal housing subsidies in the form of monthly rent payments. There are lots of other things, food subsidies. There are all kinds of kind of local and state-based programs as well. And then those are sort of the public benefit sphere. And then from the private planning sphere, probably the most important thing people can do is create a special needs trust, and also what's called like a letter of intent. There are different names for it, but like a letter of intent or just sort of a letter of instruction, which is where you sort of explain, like, this is my child, this is what my child needs on a daily basis, this is what my child needs on a monthly basis, here's an overview of like the important things to do, important people. I mean, whatever, you can kind of picture what that outline might look like. The special needs trust is basically a financial instrument that you can use either during the child's lifetime or after the parents die, to help fund or supplement the services for that child.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody has, the financial wherewithal to do that, but if you do, it's often a very prudent thing to do. There's also something called the ABLE account. You know about ABLE accounts. ABLE accounts exist, I think, in all the states now, but you can use almost any state's ABLE program. I use the Cal ABLE program. I'm in California for my children, where you can put, it's like a 529 plan. It's like a tax favorable mechanism where you can invest a certain amount of money each year and it will grow tax-free. And then you can use that money to spend on almost anything for your child, mm-hmm. anything disability related, which with our kids is anything. So those are some examples of things like that we share with our folks here in the Bay Area, and that people really should know about and should avail themselves of. But really, the biggest money is the Medicaid money. That is the big kahuna. The other things are important and they're very helpful, but the Medicaid money is what really sustains, for the most part, our children who need lifespan care.
The sad part is that you don't have somebody holding your hand through all these processes, showing you and giving you all these resources and helping you to make sure you're knowledgeable about it all.
Yeah, we always say, like, we need the concierge. We need the autism concierge.
But it doesn't, right? I mean, I don't believe that it exists quite yet. How do families even understand? Because even if the resources are there, they're not going tapped. I mean, it's a lot of families do not know how to access it. They don't know how to navigate the system. They don't even know where to turn to first. And finding that roadmap seems critical.
It's like getting a PhD. It's like I call it getting the autism PhD. Like, you have the kid and you think, oh, okay, the kid's going to be in Little League and the kid's going to go to the kid's going to go to school and the kid's going to be in the theater or whatever. I mean, you just have whatever dreams. And then it's like, it's all wiped out and it's replaced by, oh my God, you got to get a PhD in autism to figure out how to navigate this. Yeah. It's really very, very, very complex and it's difficult. And I have the advantage of being I'm a former attorney, so I have like a little bit of background knowledge, and it's still, even for me, it was very hard. Even managing the IEP process, I didn't even talk about that, because even that is really, really hard for parents. And it became, for me, especially with Johnny, such a full-time job. Just the management of everything, the management of the school stuff, the therapy stuff, the bills, the insurance, the schlepping him there and the schlepping him there, and the dealing with all the destruction and having to go fix this and have to fix that. I mean, I had to go first part-time at my job because I couldn't handle it. And then ultimately I left and went in a different direction. And that's very common. I mean, parents just sometimes have to give it all up.
Yeah. And especially because every child is going to need different resources. So it's not like you could have just taken everything that Johnny needed and applied it directly to your daughter. It's they're needing different things. You're having to re-research and get different resources.
It's incredible. They both have the same exact diagnosis, but their needs are so different. I mean, it's here. I took this picture of Johnny yesterday. Here, you can see Mr. Handsome. Look at Mr. Handsome. We're out for a walk. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes to show is that, I mean, it takes a village. It takes a whole community to be involved to be able to make sure that Johnny has every opportunity that you'd want to be able to give him. Whether that is being able to have somebody to help him to navigate independent living, or whether it's somebody who can be there to help him make sure he gets to go in the community and go on the trips to the park it looked like there, or being able to experience things that are enjoyable for him, like we all want to be able to do.
Yeah.
So
And that's
we,
staffing. It's all staffing,
it
right? I
is,
mean,
and it's
obviously, me too. My husband and I, obviously, we take him out every day. So we're a big part of
mhm,
his life. He doesn't live with us anymore because it became far too volatile and dangerous to keep him at home, unfortunately. I always thought, oh, Johnny will live with me forever. It never even occurred to me that he would ever leave. But, after too many bruises and broken this and broken that, and some terrible things, it was time for him to go. So he now lives near us. He lives in his own home with staff. Staffing is the number one question, right? I
yeah.
mean, there's a brick and mortar question too. That's very important, but the staffing is the most important thing for our kids long term.
And I would
No,
imagine
Johnny does
during,
not interact with a single person aside from his family who's not paid. Okay,
wow,
please
so
understand
yeah,
that, right? Johnny has no friends. He has no one who comes over who wants to hang with him. He has
mhm,
no kind of natural supports in the community apart from us.
yeah,
Every single person who interacts with Johnny is paid. And this is very, very common in severe autism. It's not like, oh yeah, Johnny will he'll go out in the world and he'll find his place. I'm like, are you kidding?
yeah. But those are probably extremely passionate people. They have a lot of compassion in them, and they work really hard. Like you said, it's hard. It was hard for you all as a family to be able to meet every one of Johnny's needs. For these folks that are direct care workforce staff, doing probably one of the hardest jobs that there is
I'm
out
sure.
there.
I'm telling you, they are absolute heroes. Heroes. And I know I'm so blessed, by each one of them. Now, I do want to say we have had some very questionable staff in the past. They're not all created equal. Some may or may not be drug dealers, and some may or may not be doing unethical things. But right now, we're very fortunate. And as we know, there's a severe shortage of
Yeah.
people who want to do this kind of work, which can be very, very, as you said, very, very grueling and undercompensated.
Yeah, and that's the hard part to it, is that there's oftentimes you hear about the churn, the difficult time that organizations have on retaining some of these employees. And it has to do with oftentimes how much resources, support you can provide to somebody. And this is for the staff as well. How much can you make sure that they have adequate training, they have support in the field, they're paid a living wage so that they can make sure that they themselves are making their bills and have some time for decompressing at the end of the day. So, I mean, I totally feel that, but it means that there's got to be advocacy groups out there. There has to be an active voice talking to legislators, talking to other families to get people involved. Where can people turn to make sure, like you did, that their child's voice is being represented in all the decision making that's going on out there?
Well, definitely, I would recommend joining the National Council on Severe Autism Grassroots Network. So we have hundreds and hundreds of people in our grassroots network from all over the country. The vast majority of states are represented, and some chapters are very, very active, and some states are less active, but it doesn't really matter. Even if you're in a state that's not active, it still gives you an opportunity to join forces and advocate for your children, either on the state level or the federal level. And that's very easy. ncsautism.org. Once you go there, you can find a menu item for joining the grassroots network. It takes 2 minutes to join. You don't have to give up we don't need your whole biography, just basic information. And, then you'll be hooked into, meetings and events and efforts, that we're doing. For example, I'm part of the California, obviously, group. And we have launched an initiative, for example, it's just an example of a state-based thing. We've launched an initiative to improve access to what's called ECT therapy for people with autism and catatonia, electroconvulsive therapy. It's a medical intervention that really shouldn't be controversial at all. It's safe and effective, but it is controversial because of antiquated stigma. And our state has the most draconian and severe and crazy laws that really deny access for people with autism and catatonia to this life-saving treatment. So we're working with clinicians, psychiatrists around the state to try to reform the law. So that's just one example of something you can do. And different states do different things because they have different focuses. But we also this year we had our first event in DC. So it was a federal advocacy event where we had people fly in from all over. And we went, all over the Senate offices and went all over the House offices and met with our representatives, and it was very, very fruitful.
Yeah, and I think that having the voice of everybody being heard, and you had mentioned that, autism is such a broad spectrum, and the self-advocates should have a voice. Yep. I think folks that are not quite able to advocate for themselves, but are living somewhat independently and are able to engage socially should have a voice.
Absolutely.
And so should the families and the individuals who maybe don't have that ability to let folks know on their own what they need or what those resources are. And that voice needs to be heard as well. So what is giving you hope for the future? I know that the long-term care is giving you trepidation because maybe we haven't set aside the funds, maybe we haven't built the infrastructure, maybe we don't have enough talented people in the field to be able to help support that growing population. But what's giving you hope? What's on the other side of
that? I'm a very optimistic person by nature, but this is a difficult one. Things are pretty bleak. I'm going to be honest. We have this weird administration right now where we have a Secretary of HHS, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who professes to be very, very, very committed to the question of what's causing autism and how can we help people with autism. Well, it remains to be seen whether or not his HHS can actually make progress on either of those fronts, either the causation, front or the treatment/care front. Right now, I'm not sure that things are going in the right direction, but there is a professed interest. In fact, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has said nothing is more important to me than figuring out what's causing, the increase in autism, something that I would certainly agree is an epidemic. So, I have a little bit of optimism just because of their words, but on the other hand, I'm not often crazy about their narrative and their view of causation, and I won't get into all that detail. But the numbers are very clear. We have an exponential increase in autism, and that exponential increase includes an exponential increase in severe autism. And we are not seeing an exponential increase in the resources dedicated to care. We need to have really, really attack this on not only the quantity question, but as you mentioned, the quality question. We need flexibility. We need options. We need person-centered planning, right? We need efficiencies. Right now, there's so much bureaucratic nonsense in the Medicaid system. It boggles the mind. We have to start stripping all that away and use our money as effectively and as efficiently and in the most person-centered way possible with as little bureaucratic interference as possible, so long as we still have all the quality controls. Yeah. And I guess what gives me optimism is if we all just start marching lockstep in that direction, we will see a better system down the line. We will have parents being able to go to sleep at night knowing that there is some roadmap for their child, that there is actually a real true safety net for their child. Right now, people don't see that. So I think it's going to require all the leading autism organizations, including ours, to all come together in partnership and have a clear agenda about what we want to achieve, because this is the most important thing for families. Now, I'm also very, very involved on the causation side. That's a separate thing I do. I fund causation research. I'm a little bit optimistic that we're going to be finding answers on that front, but that's a complicated issue and a complicated scientific issue, and it's not around the corner.
Yeah, but the one thing that I think is around the corner, and I have hope for as well, is more people are talking about person-centered planning, and at the same time as maybe there are disparate voices, I do have hope that people are realizing that all these voices, they don't have to be the only ones being heard. Is that we can meet the need of every single one of the groups. And it should be the goal that we have, if we're doing person-centered planning appropriately, to do just that, because then care is individualized. You're looking at how to make sure that I'm treating the entirety of that child and their life versus trying to say that only one answer is going to be it.
Exactly. So, that's like the ultimate goal. That's the most rational and common sense thing. Like, you know, if you have someone with stage 1 cancer, you don't treat them as the same as stage 4 cancer, but you treat both.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you treat both. It's not like one or the other. They need different things, and it's okay. It's okay. They don't. Stage 1 doesn't have to fight with stage 4, right? So we need that kind of mindset when it comes to autism.
So what advice would you give to families? I mean, you have the opportunity to talk to so many different people and to talk to so many different families and their experiences. So what would you tell families that are raising a child with severe autism and kind of help them to process?
I think, again, it's hard for me to generalize. I will say the best advice I can give to some of these families, based on my experience with my son, is I was always averse to medications. I'm just one of those people who's like, oh, I don't want to give him medication. I don't want to do anything that would harm him. I don't want the side effects. So we didn't really medicate Johnny in any significant way till he was about 20, 21, 22 years old. And when we finally gave him a low dose of an antipsychotic drug called Abilify, which is very commonly used in autism, it made a very dramatic difference with his severe behaviors. And I think that's the most important thing for families who are living with severe autism. Because again, I have one kid with severe behaviors, one kid without. The kid without severe behaviors, it's night and day. It's night and day. Quality of life is so much better for everyone if you can minimize those severe behaviors. And for a lot of kids, and again, every kid's different. There's no I can't generalize. For a lot of kids, psychiatric treatment is the most important thing you can do to minimize and control those behaviors, as much as I hated to admit that. So, I mean, that's one piece of advice is go to a good psychiatrist. There are always wait lists now, and explore the options for your child. If your child is self-injurious, if he's aggressive, if he's destroying property, if he's eloping, if he's screaming all day, whatever it is, engaging in repetitive behaviors that are so kind of impairing, if he's so absolutely so rigid, like you can't get anything done throughout the day, which I've seen before. Look at your psychiatric option. Don't wait as long as I did. That was a mistake. Apart from that, I mean, join up with other families in your state to advocate. And autism parents are so exhausted. They're so burnt out. They don't want to have anything else on their to-do list. They want someone else to do the advocacy for them, right? Well, guess what? Not only is no one else going to do the advocacy for you, but a lot of the disability rights groups that are federally funded are actively working against your child's interests. And I can't emphasize this enough. It's a huge scandal the disability rights movement is not about severe autism. They don't care. They care about a different kinds of disability, and we are collateral damage on their way to full inclusion and full, kind of equal treatment, and getting rid of disability specific type programs that, are disfavored by their ideology. So that's the sad truth. The sad truth is you have to be loud and you have to tell your story. You have to get to know your representatives. You have to fight for your child and for the community, because no one else is doing it for you.
Yeah, and I think all of this resonates around that whole child center approach, whether it's the first point you had as far as making sure that your medical practitioner is part of your decision-making team, and that you have the chance to be able to bring them into that. And that's your psychiatric team as well, right? It's keeping that in the loop all the way to the fact that every single person deserves the ability to be able to get the treatment and the setting that is appropriate to them and how they're going to develop. And it's making sure that that's put into it. It's whole child doesn't mean I strip everything away and it's sink or swim. Whole child approach means I look at everything this person might need and I figure out for that individual what is the right way to be able to create a living environment. And I like the way that you kind of think through that, because everybody will be different. Everybody's goals and needs are going to be different, and you have to meet them. So
exactly. That's our mantra. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. I appreciate you giving us some time today to talk about severe autism. And it is something that, we need to make sure that gets equal voice as to every other autism advocacy group, is that we need to be talking about each one of these groups and figuring out, how do we make sure that we're encompassing everything in decision making and that we're not carving out pieces and forgetting about others. So I appreciate your time today, Jill.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.